You're listening to the Digital Deep Dive, where we tackle the newest trends, strategies, and pain points shaping growth across the digital landscape. From Amazon and D2C to international expansion, join our host and e-commerce leaders across multiple industries for in-depth discussions on how to maximize your brands in the digital arena. Now, here's your host, Aaron Conant.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Digital Deep Dive podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Conant, and today, Jessyca is on the line today. Got connected with her through a really good friend, David Tenzer, has a really cool Amazon agency called Amplify Goods. So thank you, David. Jessyca and I were chatting, and we're talking about social media metrics, and specifically, what shouldn't people care about or executives care about? And it'd be interesting, as we go through this, because top of mind for me would be like a ROAS, which seemed to skyrocket and was a simple one that people easily could understand. Maybe that's in there, maybe it's not. She did a talk out at Expo West, and so this is kind of a recap of that. But just jump in, like who you are, your company, what you do. Like, I don't mind you taking a couple of minutes and explaining that, and then
Sure.
This is kind of us hitting record after we started into a cool conversation. So,
yeah, we're capturing it midway before we get too into the good stuff. Hi, everyone. My name is Jessyca Dewey. I am the founder of social media first digital marketing agency, The Y Collective. We focus on CPG brands and start with social media and then offer extensive services beyond that so that we operate as an extension of the marketing team. What Aaron and I were just chatting about, to catch you up briefly, was this idea that a few weeks ago, when I hosted a table at Expo West, I put a poll out onto LinkedIn and asked people what topics they would like for me to cover. And one of the topics that I didn't end up covering, but that was really popular and that there was a lot of interest in, was what metrics on social media should brand executives stop caring about, and what should they care about instead? And that's where Aaron and I started chatting this morning, and that's where we're headed today.
So take me back then a few years. Where has it evolved, right? Because what I've seen, and I can't believe that COVID started 6 years ago now. But I know when it hit, within 6 months, there was this massive push, obviously, into e-commerce and digital. Executives had kind of poo-pooed it into a corner for a while. And then all of a sudden, they're like, we need to know everything. And what I saw with digital marketers and brand managers and e-com teams as a whole is they weren't you couldn't educate them, right, in 3 half-hour sessions. And so a lot of what they came back with is they understood, ROAS. And so ROAS was it. And it was only it because it was something simple enough for them to understand and for teams to report out on easily while they're running, 80 hours a week trying to make sure that companies can still hit their numbers when store traffic is down. But I'd love to, is that part of it?
Well, sort of. Yes and no, right? A lot of the brands that we work with have a retail focus. And generally what we're hearing right now, in the CPG space, is that retail really is the bigger opportunity for a lot of brands, right? Depending on the margins. For example, we work with a lot of frozen or refrigerated brands where the shipping costs just mean that e-com isn't the right play necessarily, right? And so then the question becomes, well, if e-com isn't the key focus, then what is? And why is social media even valuable if there isn't an e-com play? And the answer is complicated.
Because we do think of social media, paid search, social, TikTok, whatever it is, Insta, all the meta channels. We're thinking, okay, well, that's driving to an Amazon, a marketplace, a direct-to-consumer site. And to your point is I agree with you. A lot of brands are, if they want the next level of growth, it is trying to get on store shelf. Well, then how does that redefine everything you're looking at? Oh, this is awesome. I love it. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's my brain.
Oh, no, please keep going. Here. I just heard yesterday from a nationally distributed brand that's been around for about 10 years that they have buyers regularly asking them what they're doing on social to support the brand. And that's a retail buy situation, not a consumer purchaser, right? Like, when, to be very clear, like investors and buyers are looking at Instagram as the mechanism to indicate what the consumer base looks like. And if there is a brand that has a wide distribution and for some reason isn't really being all that focused on Instagram, then that's a missed opportunity when they're looking at increasing their retail distribution.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it's interesting this how it goes back and forth, right? Because a lot of it has been around, you think about it from an Amazon standpoint. Millennials in buyer positions now, it really makes it easy. They can go out to Amazon, they can look at ratings, reviews, right? And that's a huge way to actually just get on store shelf, right? If you don't have any presence there, it's not impossible. It does happen if you got an amazing product, but a lot of times the buyers are going, look, oh, hey, you want me to replace this brand on this shelf location with your brand? Are you even going to be a fit or not? And what I love about what you're saying is, well, that happens and then the brand can prove that they're worth it and that they can be there on the spot. But then now what happens with the rest of social? And how are you then supporting it to get even more? This is super interesting. So where do brands get it wrong? Like, what are the wrong metrics?
So there are a few, right? I think there's the outdated idea that followers equals brand awareness and real community. And we hear time and time again that executives are pushing for follower growth. And while that isn't necessarily completely wrong, it isn't the number one mechanism or metric that shows us the health of the account overall. And the way that TikTok has influenced social media as a whole, beyond TikTok, including Instagram, is the discovery platform. And for anyone who's spent a little bit of time on TikTok, you might know that you get served a lot of TikTok For You page content based on your interests, not based on who you're following. So the reach and the followers are no longer connected in a way that they used to be. And so this overemphasis on follower growth is really quite outdated at this point. And instead, we recommend that our brands focus on shares, saves, and sends, because those are the metrics that show the mechanism of thinking behind the people who are engaging with their content. If the goal is brand awareness, which then eventually, not quickly, and anyone who tells you that it's quick is probably lying to you, drives retail velocity, the more eyeballs and the more brand affinity and equity that you build through people really truly engaging with your content, the more likely they are to remember you when they're in front of the shelf and making that purchase. And so what we're really trying to do is connect their recall, the psychological impact of that content, with your brand, so that they know when they go into the nut butter aisle, they know to grab this one because they saw something really cool about it on Instagram. And that doesn't necessarily translate to whether or not they follow you in the long term. So saves, shares, saves, shares, these are the mechanisms that show that the potential consumer is clicking on it and really following it. They're saving it so that they can refer back to it at a later date, which really signals utilization, right? That they found it useful. They related to it, so they sent it to their friends, or they shared it to their stories because they wanted it to be shared with everybody.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think all of these platforms have gotten so personalized, right? That they know exactly what you like as a person.
Exactly.
Not necessarily
regardless of whether or not
things.
You follow them.
Exactly. Like how long you've dwelled on the page. Did you pause on that ad? Did you not pause on that ad? What are you even subconsciously interested in? And then from that, right, looking at how many times can I get that brand exposure to the point, right? It's the old political yard sign thing, right? Like, it's just the exposure to that we'll say brand in that case over and over and over and over again, so that when you go in and you're pushed in with the selection, right? That it makes it easier. Your brain is predisposed to go do something. Kind of like
Mm.
what you were saying. Like there's this old study I think was done at the University of Michigan where there's a Michigan State student newspaper and a University of Michigan student newspaper, and they put random words on either one, and they were different words, but they put them over and over and over and over and over again. And when they presented them back to students, they added two words and they said, "Hey, which one refers to something good and which one refers to something bad?" They inherently applied good to the word they saw over and over again, which was a nonsensical word, and they'd flip flopped it between campuses so that there was no overlap. And it's like over 90% of the time, people, some crazy high percentage, maybe it's not 90, that people assume something they'd shown over and over again, they were predisposed to say it's good. So you're taking a look at it from the standpoint of, hey, how can we actually capture, forget about all the likes, right? Forget about all the follows. I mean, they are important. Forget about all the follows. Let's actually do a deep dive on who's actually interacting and then promote the content to them over and over and over again for a positive predisposition when they go in, they hit store shelf.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think if you also, we have to take this into I think I appreciate a lot of what you're saying. And I think that there's a distinction to be made between organic and paid, right? So followers are typically considered an organic metric. That's not really a straightforward look at them, but like that is when people are looking at follower growth, it usually is, they're supposing that it's based on organic growth. And then there's paid, and the objectives are pretty different, right? But all in all, they stay the same in the sense that the more interactions you have with the brand, the more closely your consumer behavior is linked, right? The more likely you are to stand at the shelf and pick that brand. Because even if you can't remember all of the brand messaging that you've been served in the ads about it, it's more familiar to you. So yes, ROAS is important. And also for a retail focused brand, you can't attribute ROAS to social media. So what are the other metrics? And it's the time watched, to your point, like how long is a consumer or a potential consumer, an audience member watching that video? We aim for more than 3 seconds. Shockingly, most people don't watch content for more than 3 seconds. But if it is watched for more than 3 seconds, then that brand's content is more likely to be served to that audience again, because that's how the discovery and the For You page works. And it's the same with impressions on ads, but it's just sort of a different objective, right? Like on organic, you're looking to grow your viewer base. I don't want to say followers, your community, people who are consistently engaged with and familiar with you. And then on paid, you want to increase your impressions and get the retargeting really right so that you keep somebody in your sales funnel. And again, like you're not, if it's a retail focus, you're not then tracking it all the way to the purchase. There are some ways that you can try. But generally speaking, we're just not in an age where that technology exists. So I don't know. I mean, a lot of your listeners, more ecom brands, do you?
Yeah, almost all digital is what we are.
Okay.
But in store, it's literally I was talking to Colgate earlier today, right? It's everywhere. I was talking to Schmidt Brothers Cutlery earlier today. Like it's literally all over the place. It's anybody that's trying to learn more and up their game and trying to understand e-commerce and how to win in it. But as we know, like you're saying, like going on store shelf is huge. I mean, that's the next lever to pull for a lot of brands that are growing. There's a lot of the big ones that are out there. They're already on store shelf. But yeah, that's where I spend almost all my time is just talking to brands. And then, we'll do a couple hundred webinars a year on topics like this. So if a brand walks in, right? So CPG brand walks in, you get, somebody refers them over to you and they come in the door. Like how should they think about analyzing? Are there like key things that you look for? Like in most cases, these are things I don't want to say they're doing wrong. They're doing to the best of their ability. They just didn't know there was another strategy. Like, how do you break that down?
I mean, I think the thing is, I want to get away from looking at social strategy as a one size fits all reporting bucket, right? We have a lot of brands that come to us and they say, our goals are increase our followers, increase our reach, high engagement, and really fun content that speaks to our brand messaging, right? And then when we listen, we sit and listen to them, we hear that their brand objectives are, well, we have the most retail distribution in the East Coast, and yet our current social media following is predominantly West Coast, and our target consumer is about 40 years old, but our Instagram audience is 25. And there's all these disconnects between the business objectives and the business realities and what their social media strategy looks like. How much does it drive business if the distribution isn't where the audience is?
Yeah.
And that's going to look different for all brands, right? So, I mean, not all, like a lot of our clients are national. Almost all of them are national in retail stores, and they still have a focus in one area versus the other. We also had another example is that we inherited an audience that was a pretty their target consumer is a wide ranging age, and we inherited an audience that was predominantly over the age of 65. So we can grow your followers all you want. What difference does it make if it's not in the target consumer range?
No,
or isn't spread out from there. So I think that
this is where the goals don't match, right? Where they don't match. You could have an overarching goal, but maybe it's just not specific enough. We want to grow engagement in followers. If you put a period there, like, does it have a business impact or not? But you might want to say, okay, if we look at our overall business and we're not on the West Coast distribution, we're only on the East Coast, how do we grow engagement and followers from the demographic that's on the East Coast? We can switch at any point in time and hit West Coast if we get distribution there. Or does it even matter if the demographic that's there isn't making any purchases?
Yes and no, right? It just depends on what the brand needs at that point in time, right? If a brand is investing in building their audience nationwide, for example, and they have a long-term understanding of what building that audience looks like and what that could mean for them, then absolutely focus on it being everywhere. The harsh reality of CPG specifically is that a lot of people don't have that sort of runway. They need what they're working on this year to impact their bottom line in some way this year. And so while, again, we can't necessarily attribute social media, organic social media behavior to the shelf, the retail shelf, what are those ways that we can get closer to the bottom of funnel so that it does have more of an impact in the more immediate future, right? If you're building a huge brand and you're okay having a ton of followers that maybe aren't where your distribution is currently because you're making a case for much larger distribution in the near future, and you know that that's a long-term investment that you're building, then absolutely go ham, But if right now in the next 6 months, you really need to grow your velocity on the East Coast, then does it matter if we're losing followers if most of those followers are on the West Coast?
No, I love it. I mean, previously when I was on the brand side, would acquire a company and the social media team that was running it, they were growing followers like crazy at a massive rate. And they've given away a car as like an online sweepstakes. And it was amazing. Like number of followers skyrocketed. And then we're sitting in an executive team meeting and they're saying, well, where's the sales? What's the impact? What are we driven? And there's no increase, like next to nothing. Normally, if something was working that good, you would see some kind of regional bump somewhere, and we saw nothing. And we brought in an analytics consultant who did a deep dive, and we were growing followers in teenage girls who loved animals because it was an animal health product, who loved puppies and kittens, and you do all this stuff to grow the followers. But at the end of the day, none of them were buying anything. Right? None of them were buying anything for at least probably a decade. In all reality,
Yeah. No,
But it was
exactly.
like,
I mean,
rah,
another
rah, look at how great we're doing. And then at some point in time, somebody hit pause and was like, but shouldn't this drive sales somewhere? Should we see some impact if it's growing
yeah.
this much? And
Yeah,
it
I
was
mean,
just
another
that pause. No, I think
oh,
that's a
sorry.
great, if I think of me, I'm the brand, the key takeaway is having to pause and saying, okay, are we being definitive enough in what we want to do to drive an outcome that's realistic? Which
Yep.
it's not realistic at all if you don't have distribution on the West Coast. Just going back to that example, to grow all the followers you want out there. Okay, who cares? I can't sell any more product at the end of the day, especially right now,
Right.
current economic environment. You better drive sales. Everybody's looking for it, and you can't just
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And again, like we firmly sit in the belief that social media, specifically organic social media, is not a sales channel. It is just not. Anybody who tries to say that it is trying to sell you something. And the objective should align with what the social media objective and the metrics that you are following and tracking after should align in some capacity with what your business objective is. And there may not be attribution in that sense, right? Like, again, there's not a mechanism for tracking that, but it should still align strategically.
And then so brands reach out to you at Y Collective, right? And
Mhm.
then you kind of walk them through. I mean, that I think is number one, is like help us get a
Yeah.
realistic view of what best in class people are doing today. Who's winning, who's losing, who's understanding this, who's doing it the best. And then, like I think you were saying, like then for each brand, it's a bespoke plan.
It's a
Okay,
bespoke
there might be
plan.
overlap between two
Right.
toothpaste companies, but for most brands coming in, it's actually going to be bespoke,
Absolutely.
which is very interesting, right? Because you can go to all these conferences, right? Like, I love this the talk. Well, that you almost did, I guess. What you're around this is like, there's not a silver bullet that fits everybody.
Correct.
So, an independent, deep, thought provoking analysis on what are your goals, and then have that drive what your KPIs you should be looking at.
hmm Yeah. Like, I think
Why does it gotta be so hard? Why can't it be easy? Why can't it just be ROAS and impressions? That's
I mean, if that sounds boring, right?
yeah.
Just seeking after ROAS and impressions, it doesn't really speak to what the brand may need. And you could you could be getting great ROAS, you could have terrible uh repeat, like your loyalty and repeat purchases could be tanking because you're not selling to the right person. Like there's all these, like, yes, that's great if you need cash flow, right? That you have money coming in, your ROAS is good, but is that sustainable? And how do we make sure that we're getting the ROAS from the right people? Like, everybody wants ROAS. If we're talking about paid, because paid is really the only way that you can drive conversion on social, then, does that last for a year? Do you exhaust your audience within a year because you don't have a, a stronger funnel built out to keep them in it? Or do they just purchase and then that's it, right? I mean, what are the longer, bigger, overarching goals? Impressions are great. We want all the impressions, but when we make them super, super, super cheap at the expense of who the audience is, what does that do?
Yeah. Love it. So, like, is there like a key takeaway? Like, number one, like, how do people? I feel like we could go on with this for hours, actually, and pick everything apart. But, like, how do people get a hold of you? Number one.
Sure.
Number two, like key takeaways for people who are listening in.
Key takeaways. Well, I'll start with how to get a hold of me. I'm Jessyca. It's Jessyca at ycolectiveagency.com. Reach out for any social media needs, audits. We do full service social as well as content creation and paid media. Love to chat with all the brands interested in talking. And the key takeaways, I think, are start with what your business objectives are, and then look to translate those into what your social metrics may be to support them. We don't live in an age where followers are the number one metric anymore. I don't know that we ever fully did, but we certainly don't now. And I think the other thing is these metrics are consistently shifting. And so paying attention to what is available and then shifting your KPIs as a result is really important. 2 or 3 years ago, Instagram wasn't showing us the watch times on videos, but TikTok was giving us indications that if there was a long watch time on a video, it was serving that piece of content to more viewers. Now we have real data on that. Now every piece of content is being shown an average watch time. How do you make sure that you're getting those signals that it's going to be served to a lot of people? You figure out ways to ensure that watch time in the first 3 seconds, actually the first 0.03 seconds, is keeping people hooked. You manufacture more content that's like that, right? You figure out what those key little hooks and levers are and work toward them. And that's just an example of one of the newer metrics that most executives aren't familiar with at all.
Yeah, crazy. I mean, do you think there's a time, I guess, just before we wrap this up, do you think there's a time where you push out a piece of creative, it's flagged in, we'll say TikTok as performing. Still that creative will hit an exhaustion point. But then there's a feedback loop into a generative AI platform that says this was a hit. Make a variation of this, and then we'll kick out a very similar piece of content. Because I know for brands right now, content is such a huge, I don't know, it's a struggle to kick out enough content. It's
Sure.
consumed so quickly and exhausted so quickly. It'd be great if there is that flag internally, which kicks back to say, hey, create more content. And there's a generative AI engine that ingests that and then makes iterations on it. And it can keep posting something similar to kind of play the algorithm.
There's a lot of AI in use currently on Instagram or the Meta platforms that does kind of flag that information. There isn't a generative tool that we have found at the moment that does exactly what you're talking about, but there's lots of options and ways to kind of piece it together. So for example, there's generative AI that can shift the colors or shift the logo a little bit or shift the language. There right now isn't, it still is a fairly manual process to get from the platform to get that creative back in. You still kind of have to refresh everything.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Jessyca, this has been an absolute blast. We'll have you back on for sure. Everybody, I encourage you to have a follow-up conversation with Jessyca and the team at Y Collective. They're awesome, great friends, partners, supporters of the network. With that, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Digital Deep Dive. Thanks, everybody, for listening in. Thanks, Jessyca.
Thank you.